Thank you. My cab driver this morning, Costas, picked me up at Wayside, and he was trying to be respectful right from the beginning. He said, "I believe I'm Greek. I believe." And he asked me what I was doing, and I told him, and he asked to hear the big idea, and I told him, and he said, "I don't mean to be disrespectful, but your idea's crap." He said, "I just don't get it, and if I don't get it, nobody else is going to get it." And when he dropped me to the door, it was a great cab ride, but when we got to the door, he tried to comfort me by saying, "My mother says to me all the time, how could you have been in me for 9 months and you still don't get it?" When Copernicus told his contemporaries that the sun wasn't rotating around the earth, but it was the earth that was moving, he made a bit of a goose of himself, because it was self-evident that the sun was rotating around the earth. You could see it. It started over here and it finished over there. Of course, his observation eventually revolutionised all of physics. I have an idea today that I want to share for our consideration, which in my view has the same power to revolutionise most of our human arrangements. It would have an effect, if we could really work with it, on even marketing, I suppose, but it's certainly on education, politics, and that group of things that we call the helping professions. My big idea is this, that there is no such thing as a single person. To privatise the concept of human down to one is to violate essentially what it is to be a human being. So that the word I, which is the most misunderstood and misleading word in the English language, as well as the smallest, needs review. And if you can ponder this idea, you'll see that the word I could only ever refer to at least half of something. The problem is that we love the idea of the power of one. In the West, we love it. It is a seductive idea. It's a total illusion, but we love the idea. When I was a kid, Superman was my favourite show on TV. And whenever the limits of my childhood caused me frustration, I could leap into a telephone box. Look around the audience, I think half of you wouldn't know what a telephone box was. It's not the box your iPhone 4 came in. And I could emerge from that telephone box with my undies on the outside of my trousers, and I was faster than a speeding bullet. The power of one is a seductive idea. We see it in movies, in the media, over and over. How many movies start with "here's an injustice," and then some hero fights against the odds, usually shooting a lot of bad guys, and eventually delivers justice or saves the day? We love it, and it's a total illusion. I remember when society used to be made up of units called citizens. That's the language we used before we worked out that really society was made up of units called consumers. Can you hear the shift from lonely to desperately lonely? It's even in the language. I remember when we used to elect governments. Of course, we don't do that anymore. We elect persons. And we're really looking for Superman or Superwoman. And when the persons we elect turn out to be persons, we ditch them. And interestingly enough, we never ask ourselves, what illusion is it that propels us to want Superman? We never ask that. We only ever ditch today's person and we go looking for the next Superman or the next Superwoman. So, what I'm saying is the minimum number in the fundamental human unit is 2. I could only ever refer to half of something. We pay a very high price for this illusion. I suspect that the enterprise of looking for loose screws in individual heads, while that keeps a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists and counsellors in work, is basically a fairly unfruitful activity. If you think that what I'm saying is that the vast bulk of what we mean when we use that word psychology is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature, then you must be listening. I had a preschool teacher who said to me just a few weeks ago, this is the truth, she said, primary school, half her class were medicated on a drug called Ritalin. Think about that for a minute. This is part of the nonsense that we have when we look for loose screws in individual heads to try and solve systemic problems. Will it be okay for us? Will we accept it when 100% of our children have to be medicated in order to fit into the system? Will we be okay when all of us are diagnosed with some kind of mental illness? Psychiatrists these days can barely carry the books that have all the syndromes. I suspect sitting right here and listening to somebody lecture is probably a syndrome for which somebody could help you. A lawyer came to see me not long ago, a very senior fellow, and he told me how successful he was. He walked into Wayside, he was wearing a suit that I couldn't have bought with a month's salary, and there's no doubt that he had all the trappings of success. And he told me about his success, and he told me how lonely he was. Through our whole interview, he sobbed the whole time. And he kept apologising for himself, saying, "I'm sorry, I haven't cried since I was 8 years old." And I believe him. The man had achieved astonishing things, but he hadn't found another human being he could trust to cry with since he was 8 years old. I don't know what he expected me to be, but one of my opening lines was, "It's been years since I tried to fix anybody." The only trick I had in my empty bag of tricks was that I was happy to meet him. I think my greatest gift for people actually is that I'm a tower of weakness when you need one. At Wayside, actually, we make sure that you are never greeted by somebody with a clipboard and a bunch of boxes to tick in order to work out what kind of problem you are. We say people are people to be met, not problems to be solved. We say if somebody walks out the front door feeling met rather than worked on, then we've had a great day. This lawyer actually left almost intoxicated, really, from the joy that came from being able to trust another, to be present with another. There was a sex worker one day at the front of Wayside, and I was in a hurry to leave. I didn't know this girl. Now, it's not very often that you'll find clergy claiming that they know all the working girls in King's Cross. Unless you go to one of those clergy retreats. Anyway, she said to me, "What have I got to do to get a gig around here? How do I get a voluntary role?" And I tried to fob her off, and I said, "Well, you have to believe the world could be a better place. Well, she became animated on the spot. She said, that's me. That's me. On that ground, I qualify. You have to give me a role. So I put her on our telephones. Now, she'd worked the past 15 years in massage parlours, and she was very good. We started to break with tradition, and our telephones were answered very professionally and very well. And I started getting telephone messages where the number actually related to the person who talked. Cool. So, she came to me after a few months, and she had been cutting down on the number of nights she was working. She got to 4 and 3 and 2. And then she came to me one day and she said, I want a different kind of job, and you have to help me write a CV. That was a little bit of a challenge, because the last 15 years was only sex work. So I found customer relations covered a multitude of skills. And she got a job. She got a job in a large multinational. She got a good job. And within 2 months, she got a better job. Now, the point of my story is this. No one ever said to this girl, you need to change your life. You need to aim higher. You need to get organised. Nobody said any of that. This girl just moved by her own volition. Months later, I asked her a question that used to hound me for years. Whenever I saw somebody whose life had been dramatically turned around, and thank God I've seen it a lot, my question was always, what was the trigger? Because I figure if I could bottle it, I'd make a lot of money. What was the moment that turned you around from a fairly self-destructive path to a path that was towards life and health? This girl had no answer. And no one in that situation has an answer. Listen to me. Are we talking to each other? Because the moment is by definition unself-conscious. This girl had become aware somewhere along the line that she wasn't alone. She became aware that she belonged to others. She started working for a cause that was bigger than herself. And she moved of her own volition. And that's how it works with human beings. And that's how it could work in a society that understood that the basic fundamental human unit was at least 2. It's our role at Wayside, or let's put it this way. Our role at Wayside is not to make people feel better inside their bubbles, or unless you're on Facebook, your eye bubble. It's not our role to make people feel better. It is our role to call people out of their bubbles and into a scary place, into a place where you can no longer be the greatest authority on earth, into a place which is less certain but a healing place, a place we call community. Now, a collection of eyes, a collection of bubbles doesn't make a community, nor does it constitute a social life. But imagine if we knew that we belong to one another. Imagine if we knew that every success was a shared success and every failure was a shared failure. We could start to replace some of this ridiculous games of cops and robbers and goodies and baddies that passes for social policy in our day. Imagine it if every time you heard the word I, you didn't hear a word of alienation, but you heard a word of conjunction, of connection, of relation. A word that implied that this conversation is about you and me together.